Yuzniel stepped out of the banquet alone and went for a stroll. The atmosphere of the party was too stifling and boring. Phew. If I stand next to Tez, there will be too many people coming around, even sneaking out is quite difficult. I had to pretend to be thirsty. And Tez quickly went to find drinks to help me. Seizing the opportunity, Yuzniel managed to get outside. She spotted a blond man standing near the fountain. What was he doing in this deserted place? Yuzniel quickly assessed the unfamiliar figure. Usually, there would be few people with such messy hair at parties, dressed so casually. So perhaps he was also trying to escape the crowd like me? The stranger was muttering to himself, how long will this party last? Suddenly, Yuzniel remembered the familiar feeling of standing near him. She saw the green leaves suddenly falling down and instinctively recognized him. Isn't that the wind magic researcher, Dr. Wassering Blessed, isn't it? Yuzniel approached him with joy and respect, greeting him. Do you know me? He asked politely. Yuzniel was delighted to confirm his identity. In the Northern Kingdom, there exists a renowned scholar in the academic world. Before his appearance, magic was not considered a subject of study in this kingdom, but rather a myth. However, based on mathematical studies, there are multiple dimensions in the world, and connecting with those dimensions requires extremely powerful magic. The existence of fairies and dragons is not a myth, they are merely different species, living in different spatial dimensions. After his thesis, magic became a true science. And to me, he is a savior for what I'm exploring. But he's very secretive and rarely seen outside, so I gave up hope of meeting him. But there were a few things in his thesis, the relationship between spatial dimensions and magical storms that I didn't understand. Meeting him here is indeed lucky. They quickly engaged in conversation. Yuzniel showed him her notebook containing her research findings. This computational method can predict the occurrence of a magical storm, but when looking at the notes, there are differences. Could it be that I made a mistake, sir? No, you calculated correctly. Magic cannot be unaffected by living creatures. This formula only predicts the natural cycle of a magical storm. Of course, there are also formulas to predict the variables. Yuzniel quickly asked, is this the formula from the thesis Ecosystem of Elves, written by the Imperial Mage? The stranger was surprised and asked Yuzniel, have you read it too? She replied, I've read all the theses related to magic. They quickly bonded as if they had been friends for a long time. But isn't this formula too complicated? Yuzniel remarked. Indeed, this formula. It's undoubtedly the beauty of mathematics on the other side. Their intimacy caught the attention of a maid who glanced at them and wondered, what is that nobleman doing in this deserted place? Meanwhile, Yuzniel was fascinated by the knowledge they were exchanging. Wow, I never thought I'd do this. You're indeed a renowned scholar. He was also amazed by the knowledge of a noblewoman. He pondered, I've been called strange before, but Lady Yuzniel is also strange, a princess carrying a notebook to study mathematics. Yuzniel stopped and looked at him. It seems I haven't told you yet. How do you know my name? He chuckled, is there anyone in this empire who doesn't know your name, my lady? She took his hand, solemnly saying, anyway, I haven't introduced myself to you. I am Yuhel, currently participating in magical research at Colosseum. And I am Wassering Blessed, currently working in the field of magical studies. But why do you know me? I don't think you've met me before, have you? Yuzniel replied, I've seen your picture in the last page of an article before, lucky me. I never thought I'd meet you at a social gathering like this. He responded, actually, I don't like noise, so I came out here. I'm a relative of Duke Lantia, so I'll be staying here for a while. Oh, I see, Yuzniel nodded. He asked her to keep his identity secret. And of course, that would be a secret between them. We've been away from the party for too long, the conversation is really interesting, and now I'll take my leave, Wassering said. Yuzniel quickly held his hand, wait. I wonder if I could meet you at the cafe in town this weekend? Cafe? He hesitated. Yuzniel pleaded, there's a private room for nobles there, so we can talk. I still have many questions to ask you. After considering, he agreed. Alright, let's meet there. Yuzniel was overjoyed and bid him farewell. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't notice Tesbalin standing in a corner, watching them intently. The intimacy and joy that he hadn't seen in Yuzniel for a long time made Tesbalin curious and uneasy, his face darkening. Finally, the party ended, and the royal carriages gradually left Lantia Castle. In the royal carriage, Tesbalin and Yuzniel remained silent for a long time. Tesbalin looked out the window with a blank expression, while Yuzniel was lost in thought about magical knowledge, not wanting to disturb him. She wondered, why were you silent just now, Tez? Gale had fallen asleep and had taken another royal carriage back with royal escorts. The Lantia carriage was borrowed to take the girl home. So there were only Tesbalin and Yuzniel left in that large carriage. Yuzniel thought to herself, I know I'll have to fight Tez throughout this journey, even planning resistance. But instead of being close to her and enjoying the possession of her body, he's acting so differently. Yuzniel finally couldn't help but ask, Tez, what's wrong? Are you angry with me? Tez maintained a downward expression and silence. He was about to speak but stopped, then muttered, this is the first time I've seen Yuzniel act so foolishly. Yuzniel, indignant, asked, what do you mean? Tesbalin chuckled softly, how could I be angry with you? You're the only existence. You should understand me, shouldn't you? Yuzniel widened her eyes, his face clearly in pain. He groaned, you're so cruel. She was stunned by his current look, it's that look again. Every time I touch Tez's gaze, those cold desires will arise, like a swamp of emotions, wet and engulfing me. Tesbalin clasped his hands together, bowed his head like a child, and said softly, Yuzniel, I'm scared. If you prefer someone with brighter blonde hair than my dark hair, if your smiling face looks at someone other than me, one day you'll leave me again. If you leave, His trembling words made Yuzniel unable to bear it any longer and exclaimed, Tez, how can you love someone like that? She stood up, moved to where Tesbalin was sitting, touched his chin, and bent down to look carefully, why would you bet everything on me like that? Tez slowly replied, tears now falling from his eyes, because my world has only you. Yuzniel silenced him with a long, endless kiss. But that gentle kiss didn't last long. Tesbalin went mad and jumped up, pushing her down onto the seat. He poured all his passion and fear into the tight kiss on her lips. Yuzniel was swept away by his frantic rhythm, unable to resist. Only after her cheeks had flushed pink did she manage to utter, Tez, Tez. Please don't kiss so deeply. He momentarily released her, burying his head on her shoulder and saying, why should I stop? Don't push me away. Don't push me away, Yuzniel. She hugged his head tenderly, gently stroking his soft hair, cascading down her chest, whispering, you fool. Yuzniel placed her hands on his cheeks, lifting his head to look at her, what are you imagining? I pushed you away, not because I hate you. It's just because I couldn't breathe. Her face turned red as she said that. But seeing Tez's face, which had become silly and teary-eyed, she couldn't help but sigh, oh. Yuzniel reaffirmed as if comforting a child, so, what I just said was because you made it hard for me to breathe. Tesbalin immediately regained his spirit, repeating his fervent actions. He whispered, if that's the case, I can breathe through my nose. Yuzniel snapped irritably, everyone knows that. She covered her mouth, blushing and annoyed, this is only our second kiss, and I'll be embarrassed. You're an emperor, after all, why are you crying in front of me? He murmured, I don't know, every time I'm in front of you, my tears just won't stop. Maybe because of love? Yuzniel sighed, love? You're always so anxious and prone to tears, and then suddenly you smile. That's love, isn't it? I don't know either. Yuzniel. These heart-to-heart conversations continued between them, without any need for deliberation or arrangement of speech order. Tesbalin buried his head in Yuzniel's neck, enjoying her tenderness. Yuzniel thought to herself, although I don't know, that last kiss was truly sweet. In Harlan's castle, Yuzniel sat by the fireplace, sipping tea. She reminisced about today's events. Tez confessed his fear of loving her, but in truth, it was she who feared love. How could Tez have known it was love from the beginning? This time, she still couldn't be sure or decide. What made him so certain? Yuzniel. Yuzniel. Eugen's call snapped her out of her thoughts. Can't you hear me? Yuzniel looked at her, puzzled, not knowing what she had just said. What's wrong? I came here to tell you something important, and you're just sitting there, Eugen said. Yuzniel quickly denied, no, I'm listening. Anyway. Congratulations on becoming the heiress to your family's title. You've always wanted that, and now you've finally achieved it. Eugen sarcastically remarked, what? I owe part of it to you. They shared cake and conversation. Yuzniel was surprised. I contributed? How so? Eugen explained, yes, when His Majesty declared he wouldn't accept Lily's apology, my father was very worried. Since she's his beloved youngest daughter, he feared she might be executed. So, he negotiated with His Majesty and asked to return the title of Earl. And His Majesty let me become the head of the family. He gave me a choice between the Sunni family being wiped out or me becoming the Lord. Yuzniel hesitated, it feels like I'm invisible. Maybe Tez isn't pleased because I used to be his dance partner a few times. Eugen firmly said, nevertheless, I've achieved what I wanted. And I have no regrets. Yuzniel agreed somewhat, oh. And people's reactions aren't very comfortable. Eugen commented. Yuzniel asked, what's bothering you? Eugen pondered for a moment, feeling a bit melancholic. Because of Lord Boned's son. Yuzniel inquired, Arthur? Eugen slowly stabbed a strawberry on the cake with her fork and trembled slightly. Yuzniel, you know how much I like him. But if I become the head of the Sunni family, Arthur won't have a chance anymore. And he'll inherit the Boned family later. Yuzniel consoled, besides Arthur, the Boned family still has other heirs, right? Eugen looked straight at the truth and said, even so, none are more suitable than him. The man I marry will become the son-in-law of the Sunni family, so I don't think the Duke of Boned will agree. It's about letting their heir come to the Sunni family. Eugen continued, and perhaps from the beginning, Arthur didn't have feelings for me. Yuzniel asked again, so, are you planning to give up the position of your family's heir? Eugen coldly replied, no, I'll find a suitable man. I won't do foolish things, like sacrificing for love. And above all, I don't believe in eternal love. Yuzniel was puzzled, why? Eugen lowered her gaze to her teacup, her dark eyes reflecting the tea's darkness, and replied, do you know why my father loved Lily Sunni so much? Her mother wasn't a political marriage, but a lover. Lily is his illegitimate child, so he loves her even more. Now that my father is gone, rumors will soon arise. The relationship between the Duke and Duchess of Harland is very good, so you wouldn't understand this. But having seen my father have affairs throughout my childhood, it's hard for me to believe in love. I'm sorry, maybe I'm just confused. Yuzniel paused, not saying anything. Deep down, the sad stories of past lives resurfaced, and she silently said, it's not like that. I understand your feelings better than anyone, Eugen. Because until now, I still fear love. She shuddered at the thought of the pain of an unhappy family. She was also worried about similar things. Despite everything, she really liked Tez. But until now, she still feared opening her heart. Tonight, the nightmares continued to haunt Yuzniel. She dreamed of her mother from a past life, calling out desperately to her, don't leave me alone. I don't want to die, save me. Yuzniel drifted in and out of sleep during the night, cold sweat dripping down her face, mingling with tears, too much suffering, please, no more. A familiar voice called out, Yuzniel, are you okay? Yuzniel, still in a daze, murmured, Tez? Tez Balin gently embraced her shoulders and asked, are you all right? Leaning against him, she asked, why are you here? Tess Balin chuckled softly, why wouldn't I be? Of course, I have to be by your side. Yuzniel, still half in a dreamy state, began to feel calmer. Yes, you're right. Under the moonlight shining into the quiet room, she sat there in Tez's embrace, his hand resting on hers. Yuzniel sighed, asking, do you truly love me? Yes, I love you, Yuzniel, he replied earnestly. Yuzniel whispered to herself, then can you stay with me for the rest of our lives? Tez remained silent. No, this was not possible. He lowered his head to lift Yuzniel's chin. Don't you know you shouldn't have to ask? Yuzniel, eventually, you'll leave me too. Yuzniel fell silent in the face of his accusation. You know my heart loves you, but you're too focused on studying magic. Compared to me, someone right in front of you, you're chasing uncertain things about whether you can return or not. Yuzniel tried to explain, that's not it. It's because I can't leave my mother alone. But a cold voice interrupted, Yuzniel, you're not afraid that Tez will leave you. It's the moment the door of opportunity opens, you're always afraid of betraying love. A different Yuzniel, questioning herself in her mind. That Yuzniel was mocking her, coward. Terrified and trembling, she tried to shout, no. I said no. She was so frightened that she jolted awake, still crying, realizing she was in her own room. Yuzniel sat up, looking at her hands to confirm if she was awake or still dreaming. Was it a dream? She sighed, now I'm encountering so many kinds of nightmares. Yuzniel slumped into her blanket, exhausted. It was already morning. Today was the weekend, and the appointment with Professor Wassering was scheduled. At the cafe on the corner of the street in town, he was sitting there, deeply engrossed in a book. Yuzniel's call made him look up. Nice to see you again, I've been waiting for you. Yuzniel, wearing a modest cloak, greeted him softly, sorry for being late. I took extra time to avoid attracting attention. A cup of strong coffee was brought over, and they began their conversation. Yuzniel asked, have you been waiting long? The professor calmly replied, the waiting time wasn't boring at all. She complimented, you have a very polite way of speaking. He chuckled, I won't answer that. Since our last meeting, I've been looking forward to this appointment. It's been a long time since we could have such a comfortable conversation. Yuzniel sipped her coffee and looked at the young professor in front of her. He was thinking to himself, I dressed very formally to make her see me as a researcher. As the conversation delved into the main topic, Yuzniel asked, so, did you start your research from wind magic? Haha, yes. A stack of papers was laid out on the table. If you look at these documents, this section, haha. This formula is wrong. While Yuzniel was deeply focused and tense with the magical formulas, Wassering kept glancing at her. Compared to our last meeting, I'm even more curious about you now. He suddenly asked, why are you so interested in studying magic, Your Highness? For example, I'm focusing on researching to publish a new thesis. Since my job revolves around it, my focus naturally gravitates towards it. And besides, magical research is fascinating. So, I thought Princess Harland would also be a bookworm like me. But from what I see, you don't seem very interested in it. Yuzniel stopped reading and looked at him. He continued, actually, I even sense that something is bothering you. Yuzniel put down her coffee cup, honestly saying, actually, I'm more interested in the movement of space than magic. So, I joined a research project on magical storms, catalysts for opening spatial dimensions. But I'm stuck in predicting where the magical storms will occur. So, that's why I'm impatient. I feel like I'm lost. The professor, surprised, said, that's a change of direction. I've discovered a few things while preparing for my next thesis. So far, the appearance of storms was attributed to magical creatures, but in reality, a storm only occurs where there are dragons and fairies. So, by accurately calculating the movement of these races, we can predict where the next storms will occur. Yuzniel was shocked. That's true, but the immigration records of these races are banned on the mainland for protection purposes. But this is just my speculation. Wassering suddenly pulled out a document. If that's the case, I think I can help. Records related to the movements of races. I copied them from the forbidden library of the palace for emergency situations. With this information, I can create new formulas. Yuzniel hesitated. Professor, do you think space travel is possible? On a theoretical level, it might be possible, but this is just a hypothesis, no one knows for sure. Yuzniel sighed, so it's impossible to know. She thought, things are still uncertain, but today I learned a lot from Professor Wassering, so if I have his help, I'll get closer to the level of being able to travel. That's the moment I'm looking forward to. He slowly said, although I don't know what you're searching for, I hope you find the right path. Yuzniel falls silent when thinking of Tez. No matter what, in that moment, does Tez think of me? I also hope to find that path. Yuzniel reflects on the path she is seeking. When her father left for his lover, her mother fell ill, and she endured countless hardships. Life between them was no longer her own. She was just a lonely figure in this life. One day, as she walked, she overheard some others. Oh, how boring, he's calling her again. Who is it? Your boyfriend? Just last month, he wanted to die for you, why break up now? I don't know, just feels tedious. Who needs a reason for a change of heart? As those passing by linger in her memory, Yuzniel grows increasingly disgusted with their irresponsibility. A phone call rings, she answers softly, yes, mother, as soon as work is over, I'll come to the hospital. She still cares for her mother every day. Mother, have you taken the medicine the nurse gave you? I'll check when I get there, okay? Yuzniel vividly remembers these impressions, their subtle changes. She witnessed and experienced their fickleness firsthand, the loneliness Tez would never know she endured. So, if she truly wants to turn back, she must first handle her relationship with Tez. And the same goes for him, both of us. She believed it was the right path she had found. Gale cheerfully calls to her. The little girl holds 2 colorful plush toys, showing off to Yuzniel. This is the first time I've seen so many dolls sparkling and beautiful like this. Your Highness, are they all for me? Indeed, Tez nods to the girl. If you like them, then take them with you. Gale cheers. Wow, really? Yuzniel, feeling helpless, comments, we were just heading home, and suddenly we're being escorted to the palace. Tezbalan's words leave her even more stunned, because the girl is your sister, Yuzniel. His face blushes with embarrassment as he speaks. Yuzniel turns away from his gaze, avoiding his eyes. Tez looks uneasy, noticing a slight change in Yuzniel today. She distances herself from him, standing apart and avoiding him. Gale curiously asks, Yuzniel of mine? Yuzniel hears the girl repeat Tezbalan's words and blushes, calling out, Gale, let's talk for a moment, shall we? She pulls the girl to a corner, pointing to the pile of toys and gifts scattered there, and says, you said we had to go somewhere before going home, and that place is the palace? Gale holds up the beautiful doll excitedly. His Majesty invited me here and said he had a gift for me. Yuzniel raises an eyebrow and reads the letter. He sent an invitation when? Yuzniel scolds Gale, you should have told me earlier. I'll be in trouble. Tezbalan observes silently, wondering, trouble? Gale continues arguing with her older sister about how she announced the Emperor's invitation, on the horse carriage. The girl excitedly boasts about the invitation card. Sister, the palace invitation is so beautiful. But Yuzniel was lost in thought at that moment, barely acknowledging the girl's words. Now Yuzniel remembers, she was simply distracted then. Gale calls out to her, didn't you hear me? You've been acting strange lately. Ever since the party, you've been dazed, not sleeping well. The Emperor suddenly approaches, extending his hand. Lady Yuzniel, may I invite you for a walk? Yuzniel shakes her head, declining. I'm sorry, but I have to look after my little sister, so it might be difficult for me to accept. Tezbalan intervenes. Your sister is busy playing, so you needn't worry. Besides, don't you have something to discuss with me? Yuzniel shakes her head. No, nothing. She hesitates for a moment before agreeing. Yes, let's take a walk. They walk together in silence for a long while. Yusniel regrets accepting the walk alone with him. It was a perfect opportunity to set boundaries that she couldn't refuse. Balin finally speaks up, Yusniel. She feels flustered, not knowing how to respond, unable to utter a word. Balin repeats once more, Yusniel. She thinks, if I tell him to keep his distance now, he might not listen. If I persist until the end, then. Before she can finish her thought, Balin's arms wrap around her, strong and passionate. He gently asks, Yusniel, what are you thinking? Yusniel feels helpless, unable to avoid his gaze. She hesitantly opens her mouth, Tez. He whispers from behind, are you worried? Yusniel tightens her grip, wanting to embrace him tightly, but her reason holds her back. It's really hard to see the way back now. I can't cross this line. She decisively pushes him away and says, please let go, Your Majesty. Yusniel hurriedly turns away as Balin remains stunned, unable to react. He stammers nervously, Yusniel? She says, in the future, Your Majesty, please keep your distance. Balin, confused, stutters, why? Why are you angry? Because I brought you here without permission. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the latest development of this story. If you enjoy it, please stay tuned for the next installment. Thank you very much.